For most of my life, I was the helper, the one trying to balance everything and everyone. I often describe myself as the scales, always searching for harmony and hoping that peace could exist if people would simply meet each other halfway. Whether or not astrology truly explains personality, I identified with that role deeply. I wanted unity, I wanted understanding, I wanted things to work. But being that person came at a cost I did not fully recognize at the time. Even when my mother could set me aside when it was convenient for her, I was still there whenever she needed me. When my grandmother needed support, I showed up. When my sister struggled, I tried to help despite the backhanded compliments, the misunderstandings, the embarrassment, falsely accused me, and attempts to have me arrested, the gossip, and even public disrespect that sometimes followed me into social spaces and onto social media. I kept trying anyway. There were moments when I hated that part of myself, the part that stayed kind, even when kindness was not returned. It hurt deeply. I cried more times than I could count, absorbing the pain and convincing myself that if I just tried harder, things might finally change. For a long time, I blamed myself. I believed that being a good person should have protected me somehow. That goodness would naturally bring understanding and reciprocity. Instead, I learned a difficult truth. Goodness does not always come with rewards, and compassion without boundaries can become self-sacrifice. Over the years, the emotional and mental weight of those experiences left its mark on me. Yet, despite the pain, something else was happening beneath the surface. Those experiences were changing me. They were teaching me lessons about limits, self-worth, and the difference between helping others and losing myself in the process. When I arrived at my mother's doorstep, I had almost nothing left. A few belongings, a borrowed car, and only a few dollars to my name. My great-grandparents made sure to make the property heir property. I'm glad they did, because my sister has tried many times to sell houses that were not hers, and I'm sure if she could sell portions of land, they would have been sold as well. I came simply needing a place to stay while I rebuilt. She saw an opportunity to use me for the little I had. The car wasn't mine. It was going back to my daughter and son-in-law. I gave her some money, my jewelry, my coats, my nail kit. It wasn't enough. She had to pay the insurance on the car while she used it and maintained repairs. She threatened to report her car for fraud if I continued to use it to pay the car insurance. I can't and won't be threatened or manipulated. Lie on me all you want. This was my life, living amongst more lying and manipulative family. Even in that moment, when I felt completely empty, there was little understanding of how fragile my situation had become. I understood that bills existed and responsibilities were real. My unemployment, pension, and 401k was almost gone. All of my children and myself were going through some tough life transitions. I stood in front of my mother with nothing left and said, honestly, I have nothing. I hoped for compassion. What I felt instead was the absence of sympathy, the absence of empathy, and the quiet realization that I would have to find strength within myself because it was not coming from anywhere else. And looking back, that moment stripped my life down to its barest truth. Everything I thought defined stability had disappeared, leaving only survival, reflection, and the beginning of a transformation I did not yet recognize. That realization stayed with me. Sometimes the deepest loss is not only the people who leave us, but the world they represented and the protection they quietly provided while they were here. The strongest feeling I carried through all of it was confusion. Because in my mind, I could never be that kind of person. I could never hurt someone like that, and then go on living with myself as if nothing happened. But the people who did it to me were the very people I came from, the people I showed up for, the people I helped when they needed me. And yet they could so easily say things, spread lies, gossip, and rumors that could have caused real damage to my life, not just emotionally, but legally, physically. Because words have power. The kind of things they said could have influenced others, could have made someone see me a certain way, treat me a certain way, or even harm me just to defend a lie they believe was truth. And that broke something in me because I couldn't understand it. How could you do that to me? How could you lie like that? How could you try to destroy me and then turn around and speak to me like everything was normal, still expecting things from me, still trying to have casual conversations as if none of it ever happened? I couldn't fathom it. To me, that didn't feel human. That didn't feel like love. It felt dark. It felt cruel. It felt like something I couldn't recognize. And I remember thinking, these are not people who love me. In my pain, I even saw them as monsters. And that realization was terrifying because it meant I was surrounded by people who were capable of harming me without remorse. And I had to come to terms with that. I had to accept that this was who they were, whether I understood it or not. Inside of me, everything was happening at once. The hurt, the anger, the confusion, the fear, the grief, all of it at the same time. It was overwhelming. And truthfully, there was a point where I didn't want to be here anymore. I reached a place so low that I ended up spending time in a mental hospital because I didn't see a way out. I didn't see a reason to keep going. But even in that place, God met me there. And I can say with full honesty, if it had not been for God, I don't know if I would have made it through. I don't know if I would have survived, because in the middle of all that darkness, He began to reveal something to me. He showed me who truly loved me. He showed me my real support system, the people who were safe, the people who were genuine, the people who were for me. And that changed everything, because it reminded me there was still a reason for me to be here. There was still purpose on my life, even when I couldn't see it. God could, and somehow that was enough to keep me going. As my shifting season began, I searched for meaning in everything that was happening to me. I needed to believe there was protection in the chaos, that God was shielding me, redirecting me, or blocking paths that were never meant for me. Part of me wondered whether it was simply circumstance, systems failing, or life unfolding without mercy. But another part of me held tightly to faith. Some days I believed both at the same time. I often thought about my great-grandmother, who would tell me every time I visited that she prayed for me. Those words stayed with me long after she was gone. I began to believe that her prayers were still covering me, guiding me back towards God, holding me together when everything around me felt like it was falling apart. Even when nothing seemed to work in my favor, I felt an unexplained sense of peace that I could not fully understand. Yet that season was also filled with deep questioning. Doors refused to open no matter how hard I tried. I felt as though I was standing in a hallway, waiting, crying, growing angry, and wondering if I had somehow caused my own suffering. I questioned my worth. I wondered if I was reaping something I had unknowingly sown, or if my journey itself was coming to an end. There were moments when exhaustion made me feel as though I had already given everything I had to give. Still, I refused to abandon my dignity or compromise my integrity, even at my lowest point. When others came with conditions that asked me to exchange self-respect for survival from my mother's other boyfriend, I chose to go without rather than betray who I was. What hurt most was realizing that even when I had nothing left, my mother, her other boyfriend, my sister still approached me as though there was something more they could take. The audacity of my sister astounded me. She seemed to believe that because I was living in my mother's house, my grandmother's former home, with no job and no other place to stay, it was acceptable for her to come and help herself to whatever she wanted. She would drop off her grandchildren whenever it suited her, take what she needed from the property, and operate as if my presence and boundaries were irrelevant. All this while she herself was unemployed, living on Social Security, and seemingly with nothing pressing to occupy her time but smoking weed, drink, and gossip with her son, my nephew, and his friends. Watching her act this way made me think of my grandmother and the life she had lived. My grandmother had been generous and loving, always welcoming grandchildren and great-grandchildren, even when it came at a cost to her own comfort. I respected that love, but I refused to allow myself to be taken advantage of in the same way. That refusal, however, came at a price. Once I set boundaries and declined her gestures she hadn't even asked permission to impose, She began speaking negatively about me, sharing her opinions with her own grandchildren. Children absorb these things, repeating them as truth. And soon, I began to hear whispers from church members of the community, at church, in the grocery store, even from former hair clients of hers, echoing what my sister had said. The gossip unsettled me deeply. People I barely knew now carried private details of my life, and I had no idea what they intended to do with that information. It created an undercurrent of fear and uncertainty. Gossip, I realized, never produces anything good. Even if no physical harm comes from it, the emotional and mental toll can be devastating. Feeling exposed and judged in spaces where I should have felt safety cut into me in ways I had never anticipated. Through all of it, I learned an important lesson. Boundaries are necessary, and protecting your dignity often comes with emotional consequences. But protecting your dignity is worth it, even when the world around you seems determined to challenge it. When my mother suffered a heart attack while I was with her, I could have stepped away emotionally. I could have chosen distance after everything that had happened between us, but something within me would not allow it. I stayed. I cared for her. I helped where I could, speaking with neighbors and elders in the community, trying to make small agreements that would help maintain the land and keep things manageable. And even those efforts were met with interference and tension, as my sister sought involvement whenever there was something to gain. Simple arrangements meant to solve problems because complicated by competition and mistrust. It felt as though every step towards stability was met with resistance. My mother gave me every reason to step back and leave her alone while she lay in a hospital bed. And after everything she had done, from trying to toss my belongings out the house she asked me to live in and we agreed to co-own, to allowing her boyfriend to manipulate her into using the home as rental property. I could have walked away. That house had been ours, yet she attempted to turn it into a source of conflict for me. She never once considered how her actions would affect me or the sacrifices I had made to care for her. In some strange way, I think the universe, or perhaps simply the natural consequences of her choices, worked itself out. Her plans to stab me in the back, to take my belongings without my knowledge, to rely on me while pursuing her own financial benefit did not succeed in the way she intended. The house remained a burden rather than a profit because her intentions relied on manipulation rather than effort or responsibility. Even as I struggled with my own challenges, borrowing my son-in-law's car, having no income, and not even being able to pay the insurance, I continued to act with integrity. When my mother said she would not pay for the car insurance unless she could use it whenever she wanted, I told her she could use it. I had no choice. I had no money. And yet, when she suffered a heart attack, I stayed by her side. I gave her what I could. She had given me every reason to step back, to refuse to protect myself, and still I was there for her. I continued to care for her. At that point, all I had left for Joy were the small, quiet moments, watching the stray cats that wandered onto the property and feeding them scraps. But even that simple comfort was taken from me as she poisoned some of the cats, declaring that she did not want any kittens. The ones she did not poison were trained to be attacked and killed by her dogs. I had worked in hospitals and nursing homes, and I had witnessed death in many forms, but nothing I had seen prepared me for this. Even in watching wildlife documentaries on National Geographic, I knew animals hunted for survival. These animals were hunting because they were trained to kill, sent to destroy for someone else's entertainment. It was deliberate, cruel, and incomprehensible. Seeing this, I could no longer view her as anything other than evil. I could not reconcile that I came from this woman, and at times I did not want to accept it. And yet, despite everything she had done, everything that brought me to this point, I could not abandon her in her most vulnerable moments. Even when everyone she favored over me was absent, I stayed. I gave my care freely, wanting nothing in return except her well-being. It forced me to confront some hard questions. Is my goodness a benefit or a burden? Am I still giving the benefit of the doubt to people who do not deserve it? Should I change, learn to keep to myself, and distance myself from toxicity as my sister does? I did not have answers, only reflection. And in that reflection, I began to understand the true cost of compassion, how it shapes us, how it challenges us, and how it forces us to define who we truly are, even when the world around us seems determined to test it. It was in those moments, giving everything I had when I had nothing, standing by her even when my heart told me I didn't have to, that I realized the measure of my own resilience and integrity. I could not control her choices, but I could control how I responded. And in that response, I discovered something I could never take away from myself, my commitment to care, even when it was undeserved. During those moments, my prayers became simple and honest. I asked God not for wealth or recognition, but for distance from chaos, for peace, clarity, and the strength to step away from environments that felt destructive to my spirit. Looking back now, I see that season not only as a time of hardship, but as a refining process. It stripped away illusions, tested my faith, and revealed the parts of me that would not break, even when everything else seemed to fall apart. This shaped my belief that sometimes people truly try everything they can and still struggle, not because they are lazy, but because they lack the support or opportunity they need. It deepened my empathy for people who reach emotional breaking points, including those who contemplate suicide, because outsiders often cannot see how much someone has already endured. I don't know why or how the way I am. I can't imagine I'm anything like my mother or father. On one hand, I saw cruelty in my father's anger, in my mother's manipulations, in the betrayal of the ones closest to me. And on the other, I see myself still caring, still loving, still trying to do good despite it all. I used to think it was a weakness. That is not weakness. It's a profound kind of strength, even if it sometimes feels like a burden. It's normal to feel bewildered about where my empathy and kindness come from. Often people who endure trauma develop a deep sense of emotional resilience. My caring nature might be a conscious or subconscious response to all the pain, a way to protect others from what I experience, a part of me that refuses to mirror cruelty, even when I've seen it molded repeatedly, a reflection of my values and the person I choose to be, not what I was forced to endure. The grief and hurt about my mother poisoning my cats and my grandmother's cats is still currently painful. Animals are often a pure form of love and comfort, and seeing them hurt by someone I trusted is traumatic. That pain doesn't erase my caring nature. It's a would-have I've carried alongside my empathy. And it's okay to want to forget the people who forget me. That's not cruel or bad. Forgetting is a form of self-protection, a way to reclaim my energy and peace. I don't have to erase memories entirely, but letting go of the emotional charge attached to them is healing, not vengeance. I've been through unimaginable betrayal and pain, yet my heart is still capable of love, care, and compassion. That is my strength, and it's mine to keep, even if I choose to close the chapter on the people who hurt me. I moved from I am nothing and shouldn't be here to my life has value and there is more ahead. My relationship with faith changed. I questioned God in pain. Later, I felt gratitude and renewal. I studied scripture personally rather than relying solely on institutions. I became cautious of religious environments that felt manipulative or performance-based. It wasn't by chance that I came across this pastor on YouTube, Reverend Terry K. Anderson. The way he spoke, connecting real-life situations to biblical truth, opened my eyes in ways I hadn't expected. For the first time, I realized that I don't have to be perfect, and that's okay. Growing up, I often felt like nothing I did could measure up. I heard repeatedly that everything I did was a sin, and although I don't blame my grandmother, that was likely the best way she knew to raise a child based on how she was raised. It left me feeling like I could never be good enough to stand in the presence of the Lord. Over time, I gave up. But this pastor helped me see something I had never understood. Trying is enough. Trying is acceptable. Putting effort into growing, admitting your mistakes, and learning from them is acceptable. Even failing and recognizing it is a chance to repent and move forward is acceptable. I've learned to give myself grace, even when I acted in ways that were petty or wrong. I've learned to pause, reflect, and say that was wrong, but it's not my fault. They are the way they are. I know the truth, and I will choose a better path. I'm working on setting boundaries and not carrying suppressed anger. I'm removing people from my life and not feeling guilty about it. I'm investing into me. I take a hand to my chest, acknowledge my own faults, thank God for patience, for peace, and for understanding. And then I go on my way. I carry the lessons, not the weight of anger or bitterness. Growth doesn't mean I don't feel pain, sorrow, or frustration. I do, but it does mean I don't allow those feelings to define my choices or dictate my actions, and that in itself is a victory. I learned healing is not holding grudges. Boundaries are not hatred. Emotional safety matters. People's actions do not get to dismiss how they made me feel. I am still learning how not to lash out, how to regulate my emotions, how to calm my nervous system, how to move forward without overgiving or oversharing. So I've given examples of some of the things I went through, and that's only within a couple of years span. I know there are people who may have been through worse, and in many of my other entries in this YouTube journal, some of you may relate. Honestly, I hope you don't have to, but if you do, I hope you find understanding. I hope you work on your foundation. I hope you come out of it healed, happy, full of joy, still with love, still with compassion, still wanting to be a good person, but also knowing who you can and cannot give that goodness to. Learning the importance of discernment in relationships. If you're a believer, you understand this in one way. If you're spiritual, maybe in another way. And if you don't believe at all, that's okay too. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Belief is a choice. Even God gives free will. Faith is never meant to be forced. And one thing I'm learning about free will is that I can break the patterns I grew up seeing and hearing. I can live my life exactly how I choose to live it. I'm grateful for being a good person. I don't resent that about myself anymore. Everything I gave to people, I gave out of love. Maybe they reap what they sow. By never encountering someone like me again, maybe they don't. I don't know, and I'm thankful that I no longer need to know. I'm finally at a place where I can look forward without constantly looking backward, without needing vindication, validation, or hoping for a future tied to people from my past. But I can also admit something honestly. The ability I have to forget people, what once felt like a superpower, may actually be a wound. When someone crosses a boundary, I block them not only from my life, but from my heart and mind as a way to protect myself. So if I no longer know you, it isn't personal. I simply release the version of you that existed in my life. The person you became is no longer mine to carry. I matter more to me now, my peace, my healing, and my future. That chapter is closed, and I'm grateful for it. It isn't a grudge, it's growth. It's not a grudge. First of all, don't let anyone convince you that unresolved issues are a grudge. That's not holding a grudge. That's being hurt by people who keep reopening the wound. A grudge is when something happened years ago, was addressed, and you're still dragging it around. If it's fresh, it's reoccurring. It's not ancient history. It's this year. Of course, it still stings. And the part that really cuts is this. They're my blood. That's what I have to work with. That's heavy because it feels like I'm stuck with the very people who keep disappointing me. There's an expectation of safety there. So when they're selfish or deceptive, it doesn't feel like real drama, regular drama. It feels like betrayal. That's why it feels like a knife. It's not dramatic. I'm wounded. I should just accept how they are. That's my brain trying to prevent future hurt. It's like if I lower my expectations, I won't be disappointed. I can accept who they are without accepting access to me the same way. Acceptance doesn't mean closeness. It's not because I'm bitter. It's because it hasn't felt resolved. My body is still trying to process it. When something doesn't feel finished, my mind keeps circling it. That's not weakness. That's unprocessed grief. Because that's what it really is. I'm grieving the family I wish I had. Now let's talk about letting go. Not in a fake I'm over it way, but in a way that protects my peace. Shift from why are they like this to given who they are, what is safe for me. This changes you from trying to fix them to managing the exposure. Reduce emotional access, not necessarily physical contact. I can see them, talk to them, but stop giving them my vulnerable places if they mishandle them. Me personally, I refuse to put myself in close vicinity to prevent from absorbing backhanded compliments and monitoring conversations, especially since in previous times my own sister and mother have lied on me on separate occasions, and those lies could have put me in jail. And I take peace and freedom seriously, and it's not enough forgiveness in me to allow me to put myself back in spaces where I will be harmed. Stop arguing with reality. I already know who they are. The pain kept happening because part of me still hoped they suddenly show up differently. That hope is what kept getting crushed. It's okay to let hope go. Create internal closure. Sometimes I have to say, even privately, I release the expectation that you will become the version of family I needed. The lies and gossip may not stop, but it's important to tell myself that I know the truth. My nervous system deserves healing. I love the gospel song. I've been lied on, cheated, talked about, mistreated, but long as I got King Jesus, I don't need nobody else. Build chosen support. Blood isn't the only source of connection. I've talked before about safety being important to me. I've worked hard to create safe spaces in my life. I will keep doing that. Family doesn't automatically equal emotional home. The fear that everything will always be deception going forward. That's trauma trying to generalize. That's my nervous system saying, protect us, don't trust anyone. But that doesn't mean everyone is unsafe. It just means my system is tired. I don't have to harden, I just need boundaries. Trying to get me in legal trouble, smearing me publicly, taking something that wasn't hers and messing up my agreement, sharing private information about me, lie and lie and lie. That's not small, that's destabilizing. Of course, I don't feel safe. And I want to say something clearly when my body says I don't feel safe around these people. That's not bitterness, that's data. I'm 50. I've watched the pattern for decades. This isn't a misunderstanding phase. This is who they've consistently shown themselves to be. And there's something very sobering in realizing they are probably not going to change before we die. That realization is grief, not hate, grief. I already did something powerful though. I found safety in distance. I'm not spiraling. I'm protecting myself. Let's talk about the part that's really eating at me. I want to stop talking about it. It's not a grudge. It's unresolved. Here's the thing. I keep talking about it because it still feels unresolved and unjust. My nervous system is still trying to make sense of it. When betrayal happens repeatedly, the mind replays it to try to regain control. But I don't need closure from them to quiet my system. I need internal decisions. I made a clean internal decision about access, not emotionally, practically. Being around them make me feel unsafe. My boundary is limited text, only contact, no visiting, no sharing personal updates, no discussing plans, finances, property, relationships. I can text happy birthday and keep it moving. That's not cold, that's contained. I stopped explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me. They think everything I do has bad intentions because that's how they operate. That's projection. And I cannot outprove someone who is invested in seeing me as the villain. I let them have the narrative. I protect my life. I separate safety from resentment. Distance doesn't have to mean hatred. It can simply mean I love you from afar because proximity is harmful. I don't need to rage to justify stepping back. I don't need a courtroom argument. I just need peace. Many situations triggered me because it reinforced the pattern. Taking, interfering, sabotaging. But instead of arguing with my mom about it, which drains me, the real lesson is no more shared logistics. No more relying on them to respect agreements. No more involving them in plans that require integrity. Not because I'm mean, because I'm done learning the same lesson. And the retaliation was always worse than the initial attack. I let go of the fantasy of apology. This one hurts, but the peace comes when I stop waiting for remorse from people who don't self-reflect. If they haven't changed in 50 years, I'm not going to outgrow them into awareness. I outgrow them into boundaries. I feel safer now in my life. That safety matters. I protect it like it's sacred. I'm not required to keep bleeding just because someone shares my DNA. It's not relief because I wanted it to be different. It's not guilt because I know why I'm stepping back. It's grief. I'm not just losing contact. I'm losing the possibility that one day my sister would protect my name, the possibility my mom would say that wasn't right, the possibility of safe holidays, easy visits, trust. That's not small. That's a whole imagined future collapsing. And grief is heavy because it's final. It says, I see the truth now. Grief means I loved. Grief means I cared. Grief means I wasn't the cold one in this story. I didn't lose them because I'm hard. I'm grieving because I was hopeful. There's something else underneath my grief too. Identity. My family feels unsafe. It shakes my sense of belonging. It makes me feel like I'm floating without roots. And that's scary at 50 because it feels like this is what I have. This is my blood. But blood isn't the only form of belonging. It's just the earliest one. I already did something brave. I chose safety over loyalty to dysfunction. That's not small. I'm not trying to let it go. I'm in the mourning phase. My mourning is quieter than anger. It's heavier. It's less dramatic. It just sits there. Instead of trying to stop talking about it completely, I'll shift how I talk about it. Instead of, they did this, they always do that, I'll say, I'm grieving the family I wish I had. That moves it from outrage to acknowledgement. And grief softens over time when it's named honestly. I don't have to forgive them right now. I don't have to reconcile. I don't even have to decide forever. I can just say, for now, distance is my peace, and I'm allowed to grieve what cost me.